Hello and welcome to another week's edition of Political Paradigms. I am Toby and we've got a full house. Sunny is in the building. Sunny, hello.
Hello there.
And our founding member, Theo, has returned. Theo, hello.
Hello.
How are we all doing? Everyone good?
Yeah, pretty decent, mate. Pretty
I'm
decent.
feeling senile.
You're feeling
Oh.
you're feeling senile. That's very topical, Theo. We'll be on with that later. Okay, so we'll start, as always, with UK politics. Biggest story of the week that I wanted to talk about, well, it's not the biggest story of the week, actually, it was the most interesting, is the two upcoming by-elections. The biggest story of the week is coming next, because we've got two major by-elections happening between now and the next podcast. I feel like it might, on Friday morning, be a cheeky reaction podcast, because these are going to be some spicy by-elections, folks. So we've got two by-elections happening this coming Thursday, the 15th of February. We've got Peter Bone's seat of Wellingborough, and we've got Christopher Skidmore's seat of Kingswood. They are both what you would describe as pretty safe Conservative seats, and they both have a decent chance of swinging to the Labour Party. So I'm looking at the election results in Wellingborough. An 18,500 Conservative majority. Labour was on 26% of the vote last time. The Conservatives on 62%. Lib Dems and Greens not really a factor, but this is a seat that Reform UK are really hoping to play in. Meanwhile, looking at Kingswood, so Peter Bone obviously in Wellingborough went because of scandal. Kingswood, the guy resigned on principle around issues of climate. That is an 11,000 Conservative majority. Conservatives were on 56% of the vote to Labour's 33%. An easier shift. Again, Lib Dems and Greens not really a factor. Reform are playing there, but not anywhere near as large a scale as they are in Wellingborough. So we've got two by-elections. Cards on the table, expect them both to flip pretty easily to Labour. Theo, is there any reason to think otherwise?
No, not really.
So is it pointless talking about it? Is it Jova already?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them already flip some, very significant Tory majorities. Obviously, it's kind of like a mental barrier that has to be broken. Like, can they really flip these seats? And that happened months ago. So I'd say there's not really anything to really point out about it.
Sonny, what do you think the political significance will be for Sunak if we wake up on Friday morning and he's lost two safe seats?
Well, I think it's instead of it almost being written in pencil, it's going to be written in pen that he's going to be kicked out of the government in the next election. I don't think it. If it goes the way that we all think it does, and I think Reform would have a higher chance in some ways getting the seat rather than Conservatives keeping the seat in some ways.
Oh, so you're going as far as saying like Conservatives winning might be like the third most likely outcome?
Well, no, I think that everyone who would vote Conservative are either kind of more central, and so they see kind of like Labour as, not the enemy, if you see what I mean, as much. And then the kind of the more far right kind of anti-immigration, Suella Braverman people will see Reform as, what they want from a Conservative Party. So I think the Tories are kind of split in that way. But no, I think it's, like I said, I think it's kind of just giving even more evidence to the fact that the Tories might be walking into a political kind of assassination in this upcoming election.
See, the big question out of all of this, if we all assume they're going to lose these two seats, is, and there is something symbolic, I think, about it happening, the first big electoral test of 2024, and they sort of fall flat on their faces. I do think that sort of negative headlines for Sunak, compounding this going into the local elections, I do think it increases the risk for Sunak's leadership. And I still think people trying to remove Sunak are probably going to hold off until May, but I also think there's a decent chance that there's some serious grumbling, maybe a few more newspaper articles from disgruntled Conservatives. Theo, how destabilising do you think this will be for Sunak? Do you think there's a real threat to him next week, or do you think they'll sort of bide their time until the local elections?
I did say last time that I'm no longer ruling out the possibility of a leadership challenge.
Yeah, you came in,
I think
mic dropped that and left, never to be heard from again.
for a week, yes. I think it will only, increase the volatility and the mood swings of those in the Tory party. So again, I think anything can happen. They're probably aware of the outcome that this will bring, and there have been by-elections, in the past few months that have shown the same fate for the Tory party. So I think very possible, but not guaranteed, because again, it's not like it's going to be a surprise if the seats do flip, but the Tories have shown themselves to, at the moment, be very vulnerable and fickle, as would be expected with the route they're going down.
Anyone want to volunteer to be part of the emergency reaction podcast on Friday?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to.
That'd be brilliant, right?
Sure thing.
My poor girlfriend, because she's staying over on Thursday, so she'll have me like awake at midnight, like, yes, that's the by-election result coming through.
She's going to think it's like football on or something. It's like, no. The majority's coming.
It's coming! Quick! They're gonna declare any minute! Quick, Hobbs! It's so close. They're gonna declare. Yeah. Anyway, and on it goes.
I have gotten football level hyped over election results before. I mean, you can't get nerdier than that.
No, it's so true. I was thinking the other day, how excited are we going to be for the exit poll when the actual election happens?
God. Especially when we're all in the same room live on air.
When that banger drops,
we're
like,
significantly
whoa!
Tipsy.
Yeah. Do you think we'll do, whatever the result is, do you think there'll be like a weird cheer, like we're celebrating a football result or something?
It will either be like, oh my God, the Tories actually pulled it back, or oh my God, it's actually happening. They're actually getting stomped. Like, so either way, it will be loud.
That 90 seats for the Conservatives graphics flashes on the screen, and we all just kind of look at each other.
Like you have to see it to believe it. You have to see it to believe it, because they've been an institution. They've been in power so long as I can remember. Because I'm not that old, but still.
It's that moment where you all kind of look at each other and just go, yo, what?
Yes.
Absolutely lose our minds. Okay, so on to Labour. More on the by-elections this coming week, of course. On to Labour, because we'll have even more to talk about if they don't take them. So there'll be an emergency pod either way. On to Labour. They have officially now dropped in the U-turn. It says in The Guardian, the mother of all U-turns. They've dropped their £28 billion green policy. I'm going to try and pull up the clip of Rachel Reeves announcing this policy at Labour conference in 2021. It was a big pledge from her, and it was made as she became Chancellor, and I'm sure you guys remember, Rachel Reeves was made Shadow Chancellor. It was very much the centrists are taking over, the Blairites are back, and she came in and made this really bold commitment at Labour conference. So I'm going to play this clip here. So this was the original commitment.
To unlock that potential and protect our planet for future generations, I can announce today Labour's climate investment pledge. An additional £28 billion of capital investment in our country's green transition for each and every year of this decade.
Now, that is a genuinely radical piece of policy. That is more on green spending than Jeremy Corbyn was committed to in the 2019 Labour manifesto. And it has been the centrepiece for Labour of their domestic policy offer. Everything stems behind, what are Labour talking about? They're just talking about growth. They have no spending commitments. This was the one. And they made an explicit case for, we will borrow and invest, and that will grow the economy. It was the one sort of Keynesian area of Labour policy left. This is what Keir Starmer said a couple of days ago.
What won't now happen is that we won't make further or new investment decisions, and that means that we won't reach the £28 billion envisaged, and that figure is effectively stood down. The reason for that is because since we announced the £28 billion, the Tories have done terrible damage to our economy, not just the Liz Truss budget, but also now the government briefing that it's going to max out on the government credit card. Reckless, but I have to anticipate the circumstances as they are now, not as I'd wish them to be.
Sonny, are you buying it?
I'm not. I'll be honest. Like, I've never been particularly in love with Keir Starmer and his new brand of Labour politics, but at the same time, I think this is quite damaging in some ways, depending. Oh no, it has the potential for being quite damaging, depending on how, like the Tories and the more right wing news outlets play it. But I just think it's a bit kind of it's just a bit dulling. It makes politics feel more grey in some ways, and I just feel like it's just the only way I can think about it is in labs we can grow steaks with stem cells, but when they're grown they're grey, completely grey because there's no blood in them, so it just looks like just depressing food, and it just feels a bit bland from the Labour Party, to be honest.
That feeling you're feeling is the Overton window slowly suffocating you to death as it closes. Theo, what do you make of this?
Certainly that he's more focused on consolidating the flipped Tory vote and the kind of investment belt voters than I thought. With his recent campaign ad, I assumed he was attempting to hold on to a more left-wing Corbynite vote, but I suppose this indicates he's more focused on capturing new voters. That being said, I don't think he would have gone forward with a policy proposal that was admittedly, significant in its spending levels just to maintain a few voters, and realistically, that's what it would have been for, because within a 5-year time frame after winning a general election, the idea that you could put something like that into effect and see significant results such that it gives you an advantage at the next election, very unlikely. So, in essence, I think this is just about, again, consolidating new voters that he wants to win over, that he has to win over, and that he probably will, as we may see the upcoming by-election.
Yeah, I think the thing about this is Labour can win a general election committed to this policy, and they will suffer attacks on sort of you're going to spend too much money. Labour can win an election without this policy, and they face attacks on Keir Starmer doesn't stand for anything. On balance, I think the Keir Starmer doesn't stand for anything thing is worse than the Labour might spend too much money thing, because they've neutralised that so much. But I do think they've basically taken the opposite bet to me. I think on balance, this is a slight net negative. I think in government, it's a large net negative because it basically forecloses their ability to do anything meaningful. That's when the pressure will really be on them. They're probably going to be fine by just being the not Tory party for the time being. I do think what this does is, yes, it's sort of might depress bits of the Labour vote. I don't know. It might help the Greens. It probably won't. Nothing ever tends to help the Greens, let's be real. But I think sort of looking at it in the round, the pitch they're making, and I saw this point made on X, Twitter, this pitch, Keir Starmer speaking there, he said something else about maxing out the credit card. He is pitching the economic message, explaining the U-turn to low information voters. So he's basically going sort of low information swing voters that swing either way, don't really understand economics or politics that well. He's talking in terms of like the credit card is maxed out. We're balancing the budget like a household budget. It's Osborne economics, basically. He's speaking in that same language, which George Osborne used and cut through to the public in a way that shifted sort of public perceptions of the economy in a very major way. Obviously, the question there is that a good idea, or should he be trying to shift people's perceptions of the economy rather than operating within those limitations? There's another Labour story out today, really, and it looks like another Labour U-turn is probably on the way. So Labour's by-election candidate in Rochdale, which is basically Labour MP died. It's a safe Labour seat. George Galloway is launching a challenge. There's a sizable Muslim population there, so he's challenging them over foreign policy in Gaza. Basically, the Labour candidate in Rochdale, which you would expect Labour to hold, Galloway or no Galloway, the Labour candidate in Rochdale has basically been found, and I want to word this very carefully, because it's a statement that was found, and he's fully apologised for it. A full apology and retraction. But the headline from Sky is, Labour's by-election candidate in Rochdale was, quote, completely wrong to say Israel deliberately allowed the October 7th massacre to give it the green light to invade Gaza. That's the party's UK campaign coordinator saying. So basically, the guy is on record saying Israel allowed October 7th to happen to allow them to invade Gaza, which is obviously a conspiracy theory. He's issued a full apology. He says, apologise unreservedly to the Jewish community. The Labour Party has changed unrecognisably under Keir Starmer's leadership, but Labour still aren't saying they're not going to support this guy. And that looks like it's going to drag out over the coming days, and it's sort of front page on Sky and the BBC, which is never a good place to be as a party. Theo, what do you make of this? This feels not great to me in terms of public perceptions of Labour.
Certainly not. And as you say, there's a large Muslim vote in said constituency, which does pretty much, which very overwhelmingly, drifts towards a pro-Palestinian position, this solidarity. Galloway himself, I would not rule him out as a threat. He's been probably the most vocal opponent of Israeli policy in the last, 20 years, and he's somewhat been vindicated in his criticism of Israel recently, and I think that could genuinely make a big effect. And when it comes down to a choice between him and a Labour candidate that was obviously, forced by a PR team to retract a statement, not so much that he was forced to retract the statement, but that he was kind of snapped into line, by the party policy specialists. I think it's not a good look, and I would say the outcome could be in contention, possibly. But then again, Galloway himself has a lot of other, so to speak, problematic things in his past.
Yeah.
But again, not a good look for the Labour vote. And as we have seen that the ongoing conflict in the Middle East has been potentially a problem for them.
Yeah, and this is, I think the other thing about this is it looks really bad. And I think the other thing about this is, why isn't Labour just... I mean, if I was advising Labour right now, you say cut the cord, don't you? We're not going to support this by-election candidate. They've said something so clearly sort of... I mean, people have lost the whip in the Labour Party. Someone lost the whip for chanting from the river to the sea. Someone lost... They either got in trouble or lost the whip for saying something... oh, yes, they lost the whip because in a Holocaust Memorial Day post with a list of genocides, they mentioned Gaza as a genocide. So the idea that Keir Starmer isn't going to withdraw support from someone who's claiming that October 7th was an Israeli conspiracy, I mean, you would expect, if you were being consistent, that this guy would lose support from Labour Party apparatus, wouldn't you, Sonny?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, no, it's maybe for some reason he's just wanting to leave it for a second, but it would surprise me more if it was to carry on being the candidate for the Labour Party. But again, it's difficult to call. I do agree with Theo that George Galloway in some ways might have that support, but there's other things which might hinder him. But no, it's an interesting one to look at, and it could be close, especially if this guy kind of carries on being the candidate for the Labour Party. So it's all to play for.
Yeah, it's February 29th, a couple of weeks. You could see if this guy implodes...
February 29th?
Yeah, this is... yes, it's a leap
Did
year.
you just say... is it a leap year?
It's a leap year. Yeah. Get with the programme.
I was about to jump down your throat about that.
No, it's February 29th. So if this guy completely implodes, Labour withdraws their support. I think the one story, the one consistent story from the whole week is Labour need to get a grip on slow decisions. Like, oh, will we, won't we about this? And then it's going to be, will we, won't we withdraw support from this guy? I think Keir Starmer needs to start going into a room, pointing at people and going, fire him, do this, scrap this, keep this. It's really bad when a leader isn't viewed as effective.
I mean, the guy couldn't even maintain eye contact with me for 30 seconds, so what do you expect?
Have you had an encounter, Theo?
I had a long, those times when you're walking down a long hallway and someone else is walking towards you and you don't know where to look and it's super awkward.
Certainly.
But it was Keir Starmer with an armed guard right behind him.
Oh, that's so funny. Does he have? Oh, he has security, does he? Oh, that's great.
It was before he was Labour leader as well. It was quite funny. He looked so nervous.
Yeah, I've been in a room with Keir Starmer before. He seemed okay. He didn't seem particularly personable. Anyway,
He doesn't have a dominating presence.
On to Joe Biden. This is, oh God, this story. So we talked about this before, Sonny. We kind of came to the conclusion, hearing Biden, that he's not quite as gone as he's often portrayed, didn't we?
Yeah. We thought he might have a bit more left, but it can be difficult for him to shake that, because there are so many clips on the internet, and especially with the internet, everything gets around so quickly that people see him walking off the wrong way and things like that. And yeah.
So we had a few gaffes in the last week, and this was all underscored by a report. So Biden here confuses Emmanuel Macron with a French leader who died more than 20 years ago.
Right after I was elected, I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. It was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from France looked at me.
So that's Mitterrand, the French president, long dead, from Germany. A report came out during this week, a special counsel report into Joe Biden's handling of classified documents. And Joe Biden it's in theory a good news story. Unlike Trump, he's not done anything that would lead the Department of Justice to decide to prosecute him. This is an independent report from the Department of Justice, from a special prosecutor appointed by Joe Biden's Attorney General. Now, here's the problem. The report described Joe Biden as a well-meaning elderly man and said it wouldn't be fitting to prosecute him because he would sort of be portrayed sympathetically to the judge as someone who didn't know what he was doing. They also claimed he couldn't remember when his son died. They claimed he couldn't remember when he served as vice president. And they claimed he was basically showing diminished faculties in this interview one-on-one with the prosecutor. So this goes beyond the appearance. I mean, Joe Biden has always had a stutter. He's clearly deteriorated in recent years, but you can clock a lot of it up to he just looks and sounds very old. He's like, by all accounts, within the White House, he's been still, capable of doing the job. This is the first data point that indicates he might not be, and we don't know. There are conflicting reports. People like Kevin McCarthy have negotiated with him and said he was on his game. And, you have to imagine political opponents would say he was senile if he came across as senile. However, this is all compounded by Biden doing a press conference, taking questions from the press in response to this, very defiantly sort of dismissing concerns about his age, shouting at reporters, and then getting Mexico and Egypt confused. Have a listen. He looks very confused.
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me." Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They express concerns about your mental.
He means the judgment of the public, not the press.
Acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be president of the United States and finish the job I started. The conduct of the response in the Gaza Strip has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
Okay. So, few things at the top. First of all, Donald Trump is feeling great right now. Second of all, there is no clear reason Joe Biden is not going to be the nominee. He has the nomination if he wants it, and by all accounts, he's not going to turn it down. So this is the candidate who's going to be running in the election against Donald Trump. A supermajority of the public think him unfit to serve. We haven't seen any polls since then. Right now, Trump has a narrow lead over him. It's, it's all very recoverable, but stuff like this makes me think it may be less recoverable than it appears. Theo, how big a hole are the Democrats in with this guy as their candidate?
Yes, it's not a good look. I mean, says to a member of the press, you don't represent what the press thinks. I think these are kind of similar to what we've been seeing over the last few years. I don't think he's necessarily deteriorated. I mean, you could even give him a pass on the Mexico-Egypt thing. I mean, if he's talking about opening a gate and letting people through, obviously Mexico is a country in which the US deals with that sort of thing with a lot. So you can kind of give him a pass on that. Look, he is riding a popularity wave at the moment, thanks to economic recovery. I mean, primarily driven by the private sector, but, nonetheless, he gets to take the credit. And
well, he's not receiving it yet in polling, though, is he?
Well, I believe he does have a slight lead over Trump at the moment.
No,
if I'm not mistaken.
Trump has a 2-point lead at the moment, although it's holding steady. It's holding steady.
So yeah, it is very narrow.
Yeah.
And Trump has been having his own publicity issues as well with this ad, that he put out claiming, really appealing to like evangelical Christians, which will potentially sway independents. So I'd say no, this is not something that could massively, derail him. But in terms of his actually ability to perform and campaign before an election, I'd say that's a concern. But this has always been an issue. Not always, but since 2020 at least, Sleepy Joe has been a big problem. I don't think this necessarily makes it any worse than it has been. It's just another item to add to the list.
Yeah, I think
funny Joeisms.
I think if
it's
you're
not Jova.
It's not Jova. I think if you're bullish on Biden, which you are, I think, and to a degree I am as well, you would say people thought he was unfit to serve and senile in polling before this, and they will think it after this. So if you thought he could pull it out of the hat before this, you think he can pull it out of the hat after this. What do you think, Sonny?
Yeah, well, I think that so I'm not trying to recreate Biden. I'm actually
this is very both Obama and Biden have this thing where they go when they're thinking of their next yeah.
I think the next Portuguese elections can be very difficult to tell. Sorry, American. Sorry, that was a really bad joke. Actually, I wish I could take that back. But anyway, no, I think that the kind of this idea of, as Theo put it, Sleepy Joe is not going to go away with one press conference. I remember there was a press conference a few weeks ago, and Biden sounded kind of like a new man, like he'd been given some different pills or something, and it got firing in all cylinders.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Like he'd been given a nice shot of Adderall.
Yeah, or something like that. Maybe. I don't want to say anything. But no, so I think that I think I'm probably in agreement with you, Toby. Like, yeah, I don't see this kind of changing anything. I think people who kind of are like, Biden's not fit to rule, look how senile is, it's not going to change anything. People who are kind of defending him and saying, oh, he's not great with the people, but, he's been leading the country in, decently or whatever their opinion is. That's not going to change it either. So I think it's kind of a bit of a business as usual in some ways around it.
All I will say is, look, Democrats are taking one hell of a gamble in a very winnable election year. And to underscore that, before we wrap up, let's all have a listen to Donald Trump talking about NATO.
We're already into Ukraine for over $200 billion. And they could make a deal with Russia in the next 3 weeks, and all of a sudden they don't want to deal with us anymore. We've given hundreds of billions of dollars. And why are we at over $200 billion? And the European nations are, if you add them up, it's a very similar sized economy. They're at $25 billion. So we're at 200 plus, and it affects them much more. We have a thing called an ocean between us, right? It affects them much more. But we're at 200, they're at 250. I did the same thing with NATO. I got them to pay up. NATO was busted until I came along. I said, everybody's going to pay. They said, well, if we don't pay, are you still going to protect us? I said, absolutely not. They couldn't believe the answer. And everybody, you never saw more money pour in to Secretary General Stoltenberg well, I don't know if he is anymore, but he was my biggest fan. He said, all these presidents came in, they'd make a speech, they'd leave, and that was it. And they all owed money, and they wouldn't pay it. I came in, I made a speech, and I said, you got to pay up. They asked me that question. One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills. And the money came flowing in.
Okay, so that's Donald Trump implying he might encourage Russia to attack NATO countries and not defend them. To finish off this week's podcast, 2024 election, lads. It's going to be fun, isn't it?
Exhilarated.
Very exciting.
Oh, yes. Lots at
I was
stake.
just, I will say, I'm a bit disappointed because I really did want to just see two fresh faces fight it out on some new ground.
You were really optimistic. I'm sure at some point you were to me like, oh, Trump and Biden, they won't be running. Don't you worry, Toby.
I don't know. You just, again, this always happens. It's a very kind of push comes to shove thing. There are little issues you think could sway things. You think that these captivating, charismatic faces that come to the table, like the likes of Vivek Ramaswamy or,
Oh, yes.
controversial figures like Robert Kennedy, you think they could really sway it. But then when push comes to shove, the establishment of these parties, and yes, I consider Trump an establishment candidate.
Oh, yes.
The Trump establishment is a thing in itself.
He is
regardless
now,
of what he says about being anti. Exactly.
He
yeah.
is the new
They will win
Republican
at the end of the day.
establishment. He is the Republican. He is the Republican establishment now.
I know. I mean, the ability of candidates like this to paint themselves as anti-establishment, when they're just like the rest of them, is astonishing. And they always win. And it is a bit disappointing, especially when you're running a politics podcast called Political Paradigms. You want to see some paradigms shift for once.
Would NATO withdrawal from the US shift enough paradigms for you?
I mean, US withdrawal from NATO.
Yeah. Check in 2025.
I think it would definitely upset the democratic military-industrial complex establishment.
It certainly would that. Theo, Sonny, it's been a very enjoyable podcast today. Thank you for joining me, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
loved it as usual.
We will see you for the emergency reaction to the by-elections on Friday and normal pod Sunday, Sunday the 18th. See you there.